order. And I'm hearing that it is going to be out on October 18th. It's going to be out in 2.5 weeks. And I am also hearing that it is about as thick as a telephone book. So it goes beyond just the FISA abuses. But the fact that they went to Carter Page, an American citizen, and wiretapped him based on flimsy evidence of the Steele dossier still outrages me 2 years later after I first told our audience that this was going on.
A ruling against the president's sham national emergency declaration to build his wasteful border wall.
There's been a lot of misinformation about me, not about my dad. Nobody buys that. But it buys this idea that I was unqualified to be on the board.
What were your qualifications to be on the board of Burisma?
Well, I was vice chairman of the board of Amtrak for 5 years. I was the chairman of the board of the UN World Food Program. I was a lawyer for Boies Schiller Flexner, one of the most prestigious law firms in the world.
You didn't have any extensive knowledge about natural gas or Ukraine itself, though.
No, but I think that I had as much knowledge as anybody else that was on the board, if not more.
In the list that you gave me of the reasons why you're on that board, you did not list the fact that you were the son of the vice president.
Yeah, no.
What role do you think that played?
I think that it is impossible for me to be on any of the boards that I just mentioned without saying that I'm the son of the vice president of the United States.
If your last name wasn't Biden, do you think you would have been asked to be on the board of Burisma?
I don't know. Probably not. I don't think that there's a lot of things that would have happened in my life that if my last name wasn't Biden.
We saw you in those photos getting off of Air Force Two with your daughter, with your father.
I traveled everywhere with my dad. And I went there because my daughter was on the trip too.
But did you talk about China or your deal with China?
No.
A 12-hour flight over?
No, of course not.
That never came up?
No.
Your father did shake hands with Mr. Lee, though, correct, in the lobby of that hotel?
I don't remember, but probably. Yeah, I hope so. I hope he did. He was my friend.
Jonathan Lee?
Yeah, for almost 13 years.
He was your friend and your business partner.
But I understand, certainly, Amy, whether I'm in New York or whether I'm in Washington, D.C., a friend and a business associate is in the hotel, and my dad's sitting there. Is it inappropriate for me to have coffee with them?
So that meeting was not a mistake. It was not unethical.
100% not. No.
What do you say to people who believe this is exactly why people hate Washington? A vice president's son can make money in countries where your father is doing official government business.
Well, I don't know what to tell you. I made a mistake in retrospect as it related to creating any perception that was wrong.
You and your father ever discussed Ukraine?
No. As I said, the only time was after a news account. It wasn't a discussion in any way. There's no but to this. No, we never did.
Your dad said, I hope you know what you're doing.
I hope you know what you're doing.
I do.
And I said, I do.
You were paid $50,000 a month for your position?
Look, I'm a private citizen. One thing that I don't have to do is sit here and open my kimono as it relates to how much money I make or did or didn't. But it's all been reported. This is what becomes a distraction because I have to sit here and answer these questions. And so that's why I've committed that I won't serve on any boards or I won't work directly for any foreign entities when my dad becomes president.
Do you think that should be a rule across the board for any administration?
No, look, that's the rule that I'm going to adhere to.
Do you regret being on the board to begin with?
No, I don't regret being on the board.
current inquiry is centered on President Trump's attempts to get political dirt from Ukraine on Vice President Biden and his son Hunter. Mr. Vice President, President Trump has falsely accused your son of doing something wrong while serving on a company board in Ukraine. I want to point out there's no evidence of wrongdoing by either one of you. Having said that, on Sunday, you announced that if you're president, no one in your family or associated with you will be involved in any foreign businesses. My question is, if it's not okay for a president's family to be involved in foreign businesses, why was it okay for your son when you were vice president? Vice President Biden?
Look, my son did nothing wrong. I did nothing wrong. I carried out the policy of the United States government in rooting out corruption in Ukraine. And that's what we should be focusing on. And what I wanted to make a point about, and my son's statement speaks for itself. He spoke about it today. My son's statement speaks for itself. What I think is important is we focus on why it's so important to remove this man from office. On the 17th, look, the fact that George Washington worried on the first time he spoke after being elected president that what we had to worry about is foreign interference in our elections. It was the greatest threat to America. This president on three occasions, has invited foreign governments and heads of government to get engaged in trying to alter our elections. The fact is that it is outrageous. Rudy Giuliani, the president, and his thugs have already proven that they, in fact, are flat lying. What we have to do now is focus on Donald Trump. He doesn't want me to be the candidate. He's going after me because he knows if I get the nomination, I will beat him like a drum.
Sorry, I just want to follow up. Mr. Vice President, as you said, your son Hunter today gave an interview, admitted that he made a mistake and showed poor judgment by serving on that board in Ukraine. Did you make a mistake by letting him? You were the point person on Ukraine at the time, if you can answer.
Look, my son's statement speaks for itself. I did my job. I never discussed a single thing with my son about anything having to do with Ukraine. No one has indicated I have. We've always kept everything separate. Even when my son was the Attorney General of the state of Delaware, we never discussed anything. So there'd be no potential conflict. My son made a judgment. I'm proud of the judgment he made. I'm proud of what he had to say. And let's focus on this. The fact of the matter is that this is about Trump's corruption. That's what we should be focusing on.
Senator Sanders.
That our founders had very deep suspicion about foreigners interfering in our government and again in our elections, and the emoluments clause was there, put there specifically for that purpose, to protect us from any influence of foreign governments. So the fact that we would be here in an inquiry that relates to the president asking a foreign government to help the president in his re-election by granting or withholding the timing of military assistance that had been voted on by the Congress is just has so many violations in it. It undermines our national security. We were sending that military assistance because of Ukraine needing that vis-a-vis Russia. All roads seem to lead to Putin, Mr. President, though, isn't it so? And then when we talk about undermining the integrity of our elections, that's wrong. And when you're talking about violating the president's oath of office to protect, defend, and preserve the Constitution of the United States to the best of his ability, that's the presidential, to the best of his ability. Well.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I wanted to give you a brief update on the investigation. In the last couple of weeks, I think we've made dramatic progress in answering some of the questions surrounding that July telephone call between President Trump and President Zelensky, in which the President of the United States sought to coerce a vulnerable ally into conducting, I think, what can best be described as sham investigations involving his opponent and involving a debunked conspiracy theory about the 2016 election.
The White House says it's not cooperating in part because there hasn't been a vote to formalize this impeachment inquiry. Why not hold the vote and call the White House bluff?
Will the Speaker respond to that? But, I think the Constitution is very clear. The House will have the sole power of impeachment. And there is no court that's going to find otherwise. And I think the Republicans know it. But they don't want to discuss the president's conduct. They would much rather discuss process. Because they can't defend the president's conduct. And every time they're asked, you see just how difficult, how indeed impossible it is to justify the unjustifiable.
As the distinguished chairman said, there's no requirement that we have a vote. And so at this time, we will not be having a vote. And I'm very pleased with the thoughtfulness of our caucus in terms of being supportive of the path that we are on in terms of fairness, in terms of seeking the truth, in terms of upholding the Constitution of the United States. I thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I can follow up on that point. That's a very key point to it. And as the chairman says, the Constitution, Article 1, Section 2 and 3 are clear about what bodies have power of impeachment here. But that said, when you hear from your caucus, we're not ready to have a vote yet. Why not call the administration's bluff and say...
Well, because we're not here to call bluffs. We're here to find the truth, to uphold the Constitution of the United States. This is not a game for us. This is deadly serious. And we're on a path that is taking us to a path to truth and a timetable that respects our Constitution. I'll remind you that this news broke on September 17th, Constitution Day. Constitution Day, the day our Constitution was adopted in 1787. It broke that the president had violated his oath of office to protect, defend, and preserve the Constitution of the United States to the best of his ability. So we are honoring our responsibilities. We are honoring the Constitution. That's not what they're doing.
Are you concerned about them trying to...
I'm not concerned about anything. They have no substance. They can't defend the president, so they're going to process. We're not going to. Thank you all very much.
Tremendous corruption in the 2016 election. I think even you would admit that. The election was disgraceful what happened and what happened to me and what happened to the Republicans. And that continues with Nancy Pelosi and with Schiff. Adam Schiff got caught making up statements that he said I said that I didn't say, which is fraud. I mean, it's purely fraudulent. So it continues. So Rudy was a great prosecutor. He was the best mayor in the history of the city of New York, as far as I can see. I think he's pretty much acknowledged what he did for crime and everything else. And when he saw what was going on with our election of 2016, the election I won, but the election that was absolutely corrupted by things that took place in government. Now, we'll see what happens. The IG report's going to come out soon, and we'll see what happens. I think I know nothing about it. In terms of the report, I'm waiting for the report like everybody else, but I predict you will see things that you don't even believe. The level of corruption, whether it's Comey, whether it's Strzok and his lover Page, whether it's so many other people, McCabe, whether it's President Obama himself. Let's see whether or not it's President Obama. Let's see whether or not they put that in. Wait a minute. Corruption. For instance, I still ask the FBI, where is the server? How come the FBI never got the server from the DNC? Where is the server? I want to see the server. Let's see what's on the server. So the server, they say, is held by a company whose primary ownership individual is from Ukraine. I'd like to see the server. I think it's very important for this country to see the server. Nobody wants to see it. The media never wants to see it, but I'll tell you, Republicans want to see it. So Republicans aren't treated well. Here's the problem. I think we're going to take the House. rich while America got robbed. Tonight we forcefully condemn the blatant corruption of the Democrat Party. And nobody ever pays the price with the Democrats. They're so deep-seated. They never pay the price. They never pay, but maybe soon that will start. You know, we've had a lot of Obama people and Clinton people and some, to be honest with you, we've had some pretty bad Republicans down deep that didn't exactly love us. But slowly they're getting out. They have all sorts of protections, but so he says get rid of them. Yeah, we're trying. Get rid of them. But their partner in the whole thing is the fake news media. That's the problem. Because the Democrats and the fake news media, it's a partnership, remember that. And you see it all the time. You know, I really don't believe anymore that they love our country. I don't believe it. That crazy Nancy, she is crazy. And Shifty Schiff, how about this guy? How about this guy? He makes up my conversation, which was perfect. He makes up my conversation. He sees what I said. It doesn't play well because it was perfect. So he made up a totally false conversation with the Ukrainian president. And we caught him cold. Everybody knew it anyway. See, we did one thing. You always have to do the unexpected. They never thought I'd release the conversation with the Ukrainian president. I want to get him before Congress. And I want to see what he has to say. You know, they say he has immunity. Why would you have immunity for outright fraud? Why do you have immunity? Why? He's a fraud. But the do-nothing Democrats believe anyone who opposes them has to be crushed. They don't want to just beat them. They don't want to just beat them. These are sick people. They want to crush these people. The anger, the hatred. And that any lie or crime or corruption is justified. So Schiff gets up and makes up my statement. He makes it up 100%. And then he said he didn't speak to the whistleblower. No, we didn't see the whistleblower. And what about the whistleblower? The whistleblower got it all wrong. Who's the whistleblower? Who's the whistleblower? Who is the whistleblower? We have to know. Is the whistleblower a spy? And who is the IG that did this? All he had to do is look at the tape or look at what they wrote down, the transcribed version of the phone call. Compare that to the whistleblower's account, and you see it had nothing to do with it. So why does the IG allow a thing like this to happen to our country? Why? Why? Got a lot of bad people out there, but one by one, we're advancing. One by one.
News this week that the State Department concluded its investigation into former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton's private email usage. They've determined nearly 40 people committed violations. Are you going to be bringing anybody down to question testimonies to find out what went on here? People would like accountability, and it seems like we never get any with the Clinton machine. Ditto for the IG report that's pending, and whether or not you're going to do a deep dive into the origins of the Russia probe.
Well, there's two questions there, and they're two good ones. In terms of the email report, that would have to go to the Foreign Relations Committee that has jurisdiction over the State Department. I would imagine that Chairman Risch would have a hearing about that. How did they abuse the rules? And I promise you, I keep saying this, as soon as Horowitz is done with his review of the FISA warrant application, the counterintelligence investigation of the Trump campaign, we'll have a hearing in public with Horowitz, and we'll call a bunch of witnesses. As to the corruption in the Ukraine, I want your listeners to understand that I think Ukraine was involved in the 2016 election. I think they were trying to hurt Trump. They may have been working with the Democrats, and I want somebody to look at Ukraine involvement in our 2016 election like Mueller looked at the Russian involvement. That has yet to be done, and it needs to be done.
You want a special counsel?
I've been calling one for a year, but if Durham is doing it, I'm okay. But I'm gonna write a letter to Barr. I want him to tell me that yes, we're looking at the allegations regarding Ukrainian interference in our 2016 election. Manafort, who was the president's campaign manager for a relatively short period of time, worked in the Ukraine, and I think people are out to get him. But the Politico article is very disturbing, where DNC members went to the Ukrainian embassy to find dirt.
Right.
So the bottom line, I hope we look at Ukrainian corruption, and I'd like to call the prosecutor into the United States and have him testify, the one that Biden had fired. Isn't it kind of odd that the only person that Biden wanted fired was the one investigating his son?
Senator, hold on. Senator, stay with us. Back in a minute. I'm back with Senator Lindsey Graham. And Senator, a moment ago, you said that you want to question the former prosecutor of Ukraine. Just to be clear, this is the prosecutor that Joe Biden got fired.
All right. I want to know what happened. I want somebody to look at interference by Ukraine into the 2016 election like Mueller looked at Russia. I'm hoping that's being done. If it's not being done, it should be done. I'd like to do it outside of politics. And I find it odd that the only person that Biden wanted fired was the prosecutor. Maybe he is corrupt, but clearly he was looking at the boards that Hunter Biden was serving on. If he'd been a Republican to pull this shenanigans, it'd be all over the news. So I'm not going to give up on the idea that both sides need to be looked at. Trump's been looked at. Now it's the Democrats' turn.
Yeah, I mean, as we peel the onion back on the origins of the Russia probe, we are learning more and more, and we will continue to focus on this. Senator, it's good to see you this morning. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
So much work in terms of the origins of the Russia probe. Is this impeachment inquiry and Ukraine tied to the origins of the Russia probe? I understand you asked a question about that within the meeting. I know you can't say anything because it's done behind closed doors, but can you...
Well, they leaked it. That's a good point, right? They leaked that to one of their favorite reporters. So, that's the thing is when they want something out, they leak a fake narrative out, but then they tell us, oh, you can't leak any of this. And this is part of the problem of it's really, we'll do whatever we want. But at the same time, we're going to leak to our favorite reporters the things that we want to leak.
So you asked Ambassador Sondland a question about the origins of the Russia probe and Ukraine's involvement.
Yeah, so this is the problem. If you really look at it, what was Rudy Giuliani doing in Ukraine? It's very clear why Rudy Giuliani was in Ukraine. His client, the President of the United States, had been dirtied up by Ukrainians. Okay, so people forget, Ukraine is all over the Steele dossier. We know that Nellie Orr testified that she was getting information from Ukrainians. So why on earth is there a problem for the president's lawyer to go to Ukraine to get information to figure out where did this dirt come from? Where did it originate from? So for the president to be upset with Ukraine, upset about the corruption, because he knows, don't forget, the Ukrainian ambassador here in the United States in August of 2016 wrote a nasty hit piece on President Trump, well then candidate Trump, before the election. There's plenty of reasons why the president would be over in Ukraine, having his lawyers in Ukraine to try to get to the bottom of the Russia probe. And look, these nitwits on the Democratic side, and I call them that, I'm not trying to do name calling here, but it's like they're living in a dream world. They don't know that the dirt that they paid for, they paid Fusion GPS to send a British spy to Ukraine to dig up this dirt. And now all of a sudden they pretend like that just doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Sorry, we're going to hold them accountable. And we're going to ask the questions every time about the Democrats' ties to Ukraine. And I was glad to hear Senator Graham say that, look, we need to get to the bottom of what do the Ukrainians know?
Yeah.
Who were the Democrats that were dealing with Ukrainians? Because it appears like more and more evidence out there that there were a lot of operatives for the Democratic Party, not just Fusion GPS. They were coordinating with Ukrainians to dirty up this president. And the American people need to know that.
We've talked about is Joseph Smith's timeline, which is the George Papadopoulos entrapment timeline that we're going to show here. And I know that in April of 2016, it was Joseph Mifsud who told then campaign staffer George Papadopoulos that Russia had Hillary Clinton's emails. Now we understand that William Barr and John Durham have obtained Blackberries tied to the launch of the Russia probe, and these phones were the property of Joseph Mifsud. What are we going to find on these phones, and why is it important that we look at Joseph Mifsud?
Well, Joseph Mifsud should have been the guy that we should have got to the bottom of. With Mueller's $35 million probe, we should have known exactly what Joseph Mifsud was up to, because he's the one that supposedly first knew about the emails. So why would you not spend the first part of your investigation to definitely get to the bottom of Joseph Mifsud? Now, what do we know about Joseph Mifsud? We know that he worked with FBI agents. We know that he trained FBI agents at the Link campus in Rome. We know that he was around many NATO members, running dialogues with NATO members. So this is a guy who, if he was a Russian asset, okay, James Comey said he was a Russian asset. Mueller stopped short, just saying that he had Russian connections. Well, somewhere in there, we got to know the truth, because either Joseph Mifsud is not a Russian asset and he was working for someone else. We need to know who that was. Or if he was a Russian asset, right. My God, the State Department's been corrupted. Our own FBI has been corrupted. Joseph Mifsud was in the United States Congress in early 2017 as we were beginning our investigation. So something doesn't add up.
Because
so the fact that Durham's building evidence.
Once we know for sure that Mifsud was working with Western Intel, we know that it was all entrapment. Stay with us, Devin Nunes. I want to ask you.
They've also pointed to this issue with the Democratic Party and the Ukrainian embassy. This comes from a story in Politico that ran in January. The headline: Ukrainian efforts to sabotage Trump backfire. And I want to read from the article. A Ukrainian-American operative who was consulting for the DNC met with top officials in the Ukrainian embassy in Washington in an effort to expose ties between Trump, top campaign aide Paul Manafort, and Russia. The Ukrainian efforts had an impact in this race, helping force Manafort's resignation and advancing the narrative that the Trump campaign was deeply connected to Ukraine's foe to the east, Russia. So let me ask you, I understand Hillary Clinton lost, and I understand this effort was not as elaborate as the Russian effort, but was it acceptable, or wouldn't it have been acceptable for the Democrats to accept help from the Ukrainian government in this campaign?
No, it would be appropriate for the Democrats to accept help from the Ukrainian government. But I think if you look at the Politico article, and we're talking about just a single article here, if you accept all the facts in the article, the scale of what the Russians did is not comparable to anything in that article. If it were, the comparable analogy would be that the Ukrainian president directed the Ukrainian intelligence agencies to hack Donald Trump's campaign, steal emails, publish them, directed a social media army to influence the election, and its representatives sat down with Chelsea Clinton and John Podesta, in which they indicated they wanted the dirt on Donald Trump. There's no suggestion anything of that magnitude.
So the scale is different, acknowledge that, but this is problematic. This Ukrainian meeting is problematic in your eyes.
Well, it would be problematic to get any kind of support from a foreign government. But again, I think to compare the two is a bit like comparing bank robbery with writing a check with insufficient funds, both appropriate money from the bank improperly, but a very different degree of seriousness and involvement, in this case by a foreign government.
So the most recent person who appeared before your committee